so today we have an amazing guest with us. We have Noah T.Y. So Noah has been working with horses and their owners for over 15 years. Noah himself has founded many equine businesses that have relied on having safe horses to ensure the safety of their patrons. Such businesses include riding schools, a horse obstacle training facility, horse entertainment companies, and carriage companies. In all of his equine endeavors, his primary goal is to keep himself, his staff, and his patrons safe and accident-free, while at the same time being fair and respectful to the horses. In addition to his love for horses, Noah is also the senior pastor of a small county church located in rural Texas. Noah and his wife Allison and their 3 children live in their ranch in South Texas. So awesome, Noah! Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. So glad to be here this morning.
Absolutely. So, yeah, we're just talking about just keeping the animal first and the sport second. And it sounds like you do just that, of keeping everyone safe and the environment you're working in. So can you tell me a little bit of what you do right now at your ranch?
Sure. So at my ranch, I have my riding school there. And so we do a lot of lessons and clinics and instructional things like that. And that's a full range from like little bitty kids that are just starting out. Those are my favorite. To like, old people, people that are retired and some of them are just starting out, or some of them are coming back to the sport of riding because now the kids have flown the nest and they've got an empty coop and they've got a little bit more time to go back to riding. And so it's really cool because we kind of have intergenerational model where we have young people working right alongside older people. And I love that because it gives those young folks a chance to be able to learn and glean from, their older counterparts that are also trying to become better horsemen and do the best job that they can to be good, confident leaders for their horses. So that's kind of what I do right now.
Awesome. That's really cool. So it sounds like you have a variety of people, and that means probably a variety of horses on your facility too. So just generally speaking, I usually like to ask for a routine, how would you help a new rider build a relationship with a horse that they just met, or it's a new partnership? How would you help build a relationship?
Sure. So for me, I believe that horsemanship should come from like a natural place. I think that a lot of people, even though they may not realize it, is they know more about horses than they might know. And so I always want people to focus on what feels natural and comfortable with them. So I like to start in that spot instead of kind of pushing them too much. I want them to see that, sometimes a lot of people have an inclination to, without realizing it, they're already taking the deep breaths like I encourage them to do. A lot of people naturally just are kind of cautious, they take their time as they approach their horses. So I like to point out the things that they already naturally do. And then if there's things that I can encourage them in, kind of to open their eyes to additional things, I'll show them those things. And that's kind of the way I like to do most things. And that's how I work with horses, is I'm very gradual in the process. So instead of just jumping on in there and, toes up, heels down, sit up straight, all that kind of stuff, I want people to have a relationship that very organically grows, and so that they're confident in it as well. And the other thing I would add is I am huge on the groundwork. I think doing groundwork is so, so important, and it's so foundational to building a bond with your horse. When you're doing groundwork, I feel like the rider and the horse are more on an equal footing. And so it gives the rider more confidence because, when you're on the horse's back, whether we like to admit it or not, they are in a bigger position of power, if you would, right? And so this helps the horse and the rider to kind of be on an equal footing and grow together.
Yeah, that makes sense too. And I also agree with you. Like, groundwork is huge in my opinion too. That sounds like, plus you're building a relationship from the ground up, pretty much.
Right.
Really.
Yeah.
And
Literally.
Yeah, and so that's great. I think that's a good tip there, just starting on the ground versus just hop on, and you can build confidence that way. I can see how that would be very beneficial.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds kind of like you're going with a perception of like definitely going with patience. Like so you start off with people just feeling comfortable in their environment, and then you kind of put them together and build the confidence that way, and then you just build up from there. Is that pretty much?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because like I truly believe that like being a better horse person just makes you a better person in general, right? And we can all stand to be more patient, right? And so I
Right.
feel like working on those things, on taking things a little bit slower, kind of taking a step back. I feel like in today's society we do things so quickly and we move so fast, and that's good and well, when you're standing in line at the supermarket or whatever. But it doesn't work that well with horses, right? And so by kind of dialing things back and being slow and intentional, I feel like we kind of give our horses, or if we will, we set them up to be more successful and to be able to understand what it is we're asking of them.
I see. Yeah, absolutely. I agree completely on that too. So it sounds like from perception on just patience wise, let's just say that the you have a building a relationship with the rider's been going for a while and of this horse, and you're trying to get them to do another experience that neither of them have done to build confidence. How would you help them overcome an obstacle? And that could be anything from just a tarp to a jump to just something different for them. How would you help them jump over this
Sure.
hurdle that they've never done before?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the biggest things for me, and when I first learned how to ride, I was 6 or 7 years old, and I was learning at an English riding school. And in hindsight's 2020, I had a terrible instructor.
Um,
And I felt like my instructor was always barking at me. I was 6, 7 years old. I had a limited vocabulary, and so like all these things that she would tell us to do, it was really, really difficult to comprehend and understand. And I remember being young and having that anxiety of, oh, my hands, I was sitting up and now this and release, and oh my good, this foot goes back, and what am I supposed to be doing? Yeah, there's a lot going on. And so whether it's a new rider or someone that's experienced, if I'm teaching something new, I try to break things down into like the simplest, most digestible small portions that I possibly can. That way we can kind of break them up into small steps and then kind of tie it all together. And I find that that works with just about anything. And it's good for the rider. It's also good for the horse too, because that horse is included in the process. And for us, sometimes as a rider, we can see the end goal. We know what we want. So say we're crossing a tarp, right? We know we want to start on this end of the tarp and finish on that end. But the horse has no clue that that's what we want them to do, right? So if we start with, just let's just get that foot to move forward one step, and then we kind of gradually build on that. Then the horse is included in the process. The rider builds confidence with their ability to lead their horse each step of the way. And as a partnership, they're both happy and able to conquer whatever that obstacle or challenge is.
right. So that, yeah, just one step at a time.
Yeah, yeah, literally, yeah, absolutely, for sure.
That's great. So also, I like to ask too, just for the horse's perspective, how would let's just say it's someone who's competing and they really want to, it's expensive to compete or do anything like that with their horses. What would you recommend to invest in? Just is the best thing you can for your horse if you're on a budget, you know?
Yeah, sure. I have a couple of recommendations there. So one of the first things that I recommend anyone who, even though you have a limited budget, if you're really interested in taking your horse to another level, I definitely recommend people investing in a round pen if they can. And there's also all these DIY things online where you can build your own really cool, safe round pins. I've seen people build them out of pallets and railroad ties and just recycled materials. Because I believe, and I work with a lot of different disciplines, from cutting horses to dressage horses to trail horses to lesson ponies, whatever the case might be. But I believe that there was a lot to be gained when you take all the tack off your horse and you put them in the round pen and you spend some intentional time bonding with that horse in that enclosed area. And the reason why I like the round pen, as opposed to just being in an arena or out in the pasture, is you're able to garner your horse's attention and kind of keep them focused on you so that they can't just walk away and leave you. And then also your attention is kind of limited to that space, you and your pony, right? And so I feel like sometimes, we look at tack and all these things that, all these things that we want to do. A lot of people are giving supplements to make their horses calmer or quieter, and that's all well and good, but spending that time, that intentional time with your horse to invest in that relationship, because that's what it is, I feel like that's the most important thing to do. And I feel like in the round pen is one of the best places to do that. Now, granted, you don't have to do that in a round pen. You can do that, just spending time leading your horse and grooming them and brushing them. But yeah, being intentional about the time you spend with them, investing in that time, I think that is the biggest investment that you can make with your horse. And it's the cheapest investment that you can make as well.
Right. So it's not like getting supplements and things like that. It could cost you, it's one payment and you're getting one round pen.
Sure, right.
Relationship. I hear you on that too. And so I know in the round pen work, sometimes I hear in the past into that it happens, they get bored if you do the same routine over and over again.
Sure.
And it can get sour to that. So do you have any recommendations to round pen exercises or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I love that question too, because yes, for sure, round pinning is more than just running your horse around in circles, right? Traditionally, that's what you see, right? And so when I talk about round pinning, I'm more focusing on the bonding and the relationship aspect of it. So what that looks like, it's a lot of people are surprised the amount of work that they can do in a round pin. I mean, you can teach your horse to draw into you. You can teach that horse to move their front end over. You can teach them to disengage their hind quarter and cross over for you. You can teach them how to back up so that they're moving away from you. So there's lots of different ways that you can encourage them to work with you as a willing partner, right? There's other exercises that I do. I do an exercise called line driving. And basically what I'm doing is I get my pony along the rail and I ask my horse to go forward. I just kind of gesture, I want you to go forward. And when they go forward, I might lower my hands, take a deep breath, let them know that they've done a good job. And then when I'm ready for them to draw to a stop, I'll take that nice big deep breath, settle my feet, slow my feet. And the idea is I want my horse to mirror my energy, right? So I want them to slow down without any lead rope or any apparatus on them. I want them to choose to want to be with me. And when our horses choose to want to be with us, that's when you have those really incredible special horses and relationship rather with those horses. So.
Yeah, those are some awesome tips too, because the round pen, I mean, it's so big, and so you can do so many things in it though. I mean, gosh, like you said, you can do disengaging in the hindquarters and crossing over, and probably even side passing too.
Absolutely.
All kinds of things too. So and that's great, and just building a relationship, and you'd still be really on the ground with them, and you're building the relationship on the same level. And I think that's really interesting how you're saying, you kind of sound like when you like breathe down, it's like you're talking horse kind of thing.
Right.
That's how they talk. So, it makes sense. So I think that's really interesting. That's really cool.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. And so other questions that I usually like to ask too is when you're in a competition, like, let me pause it for a second. Sorry.
Sure.
Awesome. Well, those are some really good tips. So another question I have for you is when you're out in the field with your horse and let's just say it's a spooky horse, like something like you feel like you're confident as a rider or the person you're working with is confident, but you really just have a really shy horse. How can you help build, I know, the confidence the rider doesn't always portray back to the horse. It's just that's their breed, their hot breed. How can you help them get over that or an obstacle?
Sure. Yeah. So for me, the first thing is always slowing down. A lot of times our mind is racing 100 miles per hour. And sometimes even as fast as our horses seem to move or think sometimes, a lot of times we're moving and going 10 times faster than that. And so we need to kind of slow down and ground ourselves and ground our horses. And I might sound like a broken record because I'm always telling people, breathe, take your time. You have more time than you realize.
Right.
And you're gradual and consistent, you can kind of work your horse through it. And so what I like to do is a lot of times when a horse is worried, if a horse is spooking, if you have a horse that's flighty, what we automatically do is we react, right? So our horse wants to bolt and we pull back on the reins. Whoa, right? Our horse is spooky and we're pulling them this way away from the scary objects so that they settle down. And instead of being reactive, I think it's so much more important to be active, to find something to fill that time, their mind, their space with, instead of whatever they're preoccupied with, right? So that kind of goes back to not only the groundwork, but some of the riding exercises we do to keep our horses engaged. So if my horse is worried about something, right, I can kind of take them and say, maybe I've taught them how to disengage their hindquarters. And let's start disengaging our hindquarters and shift our focus from the scary plastic bag that's caught in the bushes rather than, and keep your focus on, let's get that hind end up underneath you. And so what happens when you do that is you take them back. If you've practiced these things beforehand in a controlled environment at home, wherever, you take them back to that place. Like, oh, this is just like we're at home. And, I've done this 100 times and it feels good. And you tell me, good boy. And, oh, this is great. And so then they begin to worry less and less about that bag and focus more and more on what you're asking and your leadership. And so I feel like when you come across a situation like that, one, it does take a little bit of preparation beforehand so that you're not just going out there and flying by the seat of your pants, right. But that kind of, taught your horse, okay, this is kind of the go-to list of exercises that I want you to focus on when things get dicey for you.
Yeah, that's a good safety tip too, because it happens to every horse. They so it's always good to know. Just bring them back to the basics. It sounds like something that they feel comfortable and safe doing.
Yes.
So that's a really good tip.
Thank you. Yeah.
Also, just because usually when you start a day and you're getting in your routine of things to working maybe with a new horse or just in general, how would you recommend just getting them in the mindset of working? Like, can you pull them out of their stall or the pasture and you're going to do a lesson or your time with them? How do you get them in that mindset of hey, now we're focusing on work now?
Yeah, I love that question because I see all too often where people just take their horses out and, they might do a quick brush and throw the saddle on and just go for it, right? And we all want our horses to be kind to us, right? And I always tell my horse, when he's being a little bit of a jerk, I'm like, hey, you got to be a gentleman, right? And so if I expect my pony to be a gentleman, I've got to be a gentleman to my pony, right? So when I pull him out, I've got to make sure I tell him, hello, hey, how you doing? Spend some time bonding with him, not, this isn't about me and me getting to my ride. This is because I appreciate you. I appreciate the opportunity to have you, the fact that you're going to pack for me and all these things. So I'm going to rub and love on him and just spend some time just bonding with him. And again, I'm taking those deep breaths where we can connect with each other. And then what I'll do is I'll take my horse out, and I am a big believer before I ever ride my pony, after I do my grooming and all that, and I pick my horse's feet and all that, what I like to do is start with a little bit of groundwork. It doesn't have to be a lot, but just a little bit, kind of like what you said, to get them in the mindset, right? So I want to get my horse's feet moving in a couple different directions, back and forth, and it doesn't have to be a lot or quick or fast or anything like that. I also want to do some transitions. I want to be able to ask my horse to go walk, trot, canter, and then I want to be able to, I like to breathe my horses down. So when he's in a canter, I like to take a deep breath and they fall down to the trot, and I take a deep breath and give them the opportunity to walk, right? And then lastly, before I get on there, I like to do a little bit of desensitizing. So it's whatever I have handy. If I've got my steady stick, or I've got, a flag or a ribbon attachment or whatever I might have, I'm going to kind of wave it around them, make sure my horse is nice and quiet. And so the two things that I'm really focusing on is, one, I want to make sure that my horse is quiet and relaxed. Two, I also want to make sure that they are responding to me and understanding what I'm asking of them. And then I'm going to add in there too, lastly, is that just like our horses, sometimes our horses have bad days. Sometimes we have bad days too, right? And so sometimes I might come with a little bit more negative energy than usual, or, maybe I've got something on my mind. So it doesn't only give me a chance to evaluate my horse and see where they are, it gives my pony a chance to take a look at me like, whoa, he's in a bad mood. I better get with it today, right? And so it just helps to set the situation up to be a lot more successful.
Right. Yeah. And that I totally agree. Groundwork, it really does make a difference. It's amazing, like how much it can get them in the mindset. So I hear you on
Yes.
that. So.
Yeah. And then the only other thing I would add to that too is, once you do climb up in the saddle, be gradual. You don't want to just take that horse off into a canter and, gun ho, here we go. Yeah, we want to make sure that we are kind of taking it nice and easy and kind of warming them up into it. So.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's interesting how you're saying the energy level, you want to bring them up and then down. So you're kind of like you're bringing the energy from the ground, and then you get them into a canter, or, moving quicker, and then you bring them back down. It's like you are also reestablishing that you're a confident rider and you're a good leader.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's really cool. Really, really cool. Yeah. So also, let's see here. Sorry, I'm just going to pause it here.
That's all right.
Awesome. Well, yeah, those are really some good tips. So something that's come up in just conversation, and you just see out sometimes in the barns, that let's just say a horse is doing something that you don't find that you want, like an act that you want. Say they bite you, or they aren't yielding to you, or something like that with a movement. How would you recommend, like, what was a good response that you would do to correct the behavior without going overboard? Like, what would you say is a good behavior?
Sure. Yeah. So it's so funny because, like, that's like a common issue that people have. People don't want to be too tough on their horses. At the same time, you'll hear this throughout horse circles all the time. People say things like, don't let your horse get away with that. Or, there's an expression people say, that horse is cheating you, right? And really, when it comes down to it, the focus is on the horse, right? And so it's not in your horse's best interest to not comply with you, right? Because the happier you are, the better you're going to take care of your horse, the happier your horse is going to be. And so once your horse begins to understand that, then they are going to strive to please you more and more. And so a lot of times, for example, a lot of these behaviors, we might see that a horse, that horse bites us. I'm like, oh my gosh, it just creeped out of nowhere. That horse bit me. And a lot of times our first reaction is, oh, let me, teach that horse a lesson. Well, before it gets to that point, we need to make sure that we're setting our horse up and that we're also setting expectations for that horse. So, for example, in order for a horse to get close enough to bite you, they've got to be right up in your space, right? And so, for one, I might start by, if I see a horse starting to kind of creep up into my space a little bit, I might start by, asking them to step back, driving them back a little bit before they get into that place. Usually when a horse is about to bite, those ears are laid back, on their head, right? And so if I see a horse where he's got a really nasty attitude and his ears are laid back all the time, head's up high and nasty, I might back him up and keep him out at that distance until he lowers that head, maybe relaxes a little bit, softens those ears. Then I'll invite him into my space. So it's just as much of kind of taking some preventative measures before it gets out of hand as it is with dealing with the issue. But then, when you get to the point that you have a pony that's biting you, there's a couple of things I like to do. Sometimes if I have a pony that immediately bites me, what I'll do is I'll take my hand right up underneath kind of like the chin area where they can't see, and I'll give them a quick little pop. And especially, because most of us, nobody wants to hit their horse, right? And so the idea isn't to inflict pain, but the idea is to shock them.
Yeah.
To surprise them. And so what happens is you pop them underneath the jaw right there, and your horse, your horse will, oh my God, where'd that come from, right? And because it's that blind spot, they literally don't see it coming, right? And so,
they're just like, oh, when I bite this guy, like,
right,
something happens to me.
Exactly, yeah. And so what you're doing is it's a pattern interrupt, right? So you're interrupting that behavior, and you're saying, when you do that behavior, okay, let's just break that thought, and then immediately I'm going to divert their attention to something else. We're going to work on a different exercise. I'm going to move their feet, ask them to back up, side pass, whatever the case might be. And then we just go back to business as usual. So it's not about, I think that line between kind of discipline and abuse is hitting the horse, to let some anger out, right? To you're mad at that horse and you just want to get after them. Discipline is more about teaching that horse a lesson, not necessarily finding revenge. And I think we've all been there, a time or two where you've been upset at a horse and maybe you've been a little bit harsher than we'd like to have been. But ideally, we want to focus on changing that behavior and making our horses better because of it.
Right. And that's fair to say. I mean, gosh, when a horse bites you, it's not fun, and it doesn't. No. So I imagine you have some emotion, like.
For sure.
Yeah, so I hear you there, and that's interesting. You say I've never heard that, like under their jaw, because they can't see that, and I can see how they don't relate that to like, you hit me, now I'm head shy.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's really that's important. You don't want to make a head shy horse.
Right.
I've heard people say on the shoulder, but never on the head. But that's interesting because they can't really see that under their chin.
Yes.
Interesting.
And then I'll add to that too, really important. So after you do that and you get them moving their feet and you get them to relax and settle down, those ears kind of perk back up instead of being laid down, then the next thing too is always go back in there and make sure you rub and love on that face, let them know, just so that they don't finish that with a negative taste in their mouth, right? Because we want to leave them in a good spot.
Right. And so let's just say, that's great for ground stuff, but like when you're riding them and they just like, you're going towards the jump and then they just totally, they don't respect what you're asking them. Like a lot of, I know even just ponies or like some breeds are just stubborn, and they just take the reins and you go the other way, how would you help that situation of like, you're not going to, I guess discipline them and like, this is not what the right answer is. How would you go about that?
Sure. So I always like to look at it from kind of a little bit of a different perspective, because like that pony that takes the reins from you, right? Mm-hmm. That little stinker, he thinks that's the best thing he can possibly do to get out of the job, right? And so my job, I feel, is to kind of re-educate my horse and teach them otherwise. So, if he takes the reins from me, that means, I'm going to be circling him around and making him work a little bit. I'm not going to work him and huff and puff until he falls over, but I'm going to get him moving and give him some incentive to where I redirect towards wherever I was taking him. Then I'll take a deep breath, let him rest towards that place. So the idea is to kind of change his thinking that, hey, if I just go wherever he asks me to go, that is literally the best place for me to go, because then I get to rest, I don't have to work, and life is so easy for me. And then on top of that, I really like to lay the praise on my ponies. People laugh at me because I talk to my horses all the time, and I'm loving on them. I'm big old guy, I'm baby talking them and stuff, but it makes a huge difference because not that they can understand our words, but they can understand our energy and our sentiment, right? Yeah. And so they appreciate it when we kind of show that adoration and that love and respect for them. And they really do reciprocate that in ways that you can never imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And tonality and just your feelings.
Yes.
Like I really think that I think you're right on for just emotion. Like they can tell when you're having a good day or a bad day.
Yeah.
They don't hold anything outside of that present moment. So you just giving them that praise, that's everything to them. So I think that's
Yes.
really
Yes.
good. So so I hear that you're giving out some free gifts. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. I'm super excited. Yeah. So I'm going to be giving away my best-selling DVD, and it's called Gradual Desensitizing. And I love this DVD because what we do is we take some spooky rank ponies and we work them through in a gradual fashion to build their confidence. And it's amazing to see the transformation that happens in some of these horses. And with the people that work with their horses, people are always telling me how this DVD has changed their relationship with their horse and the way that they think and look at everything their horse does. Yeah, so we're going to be giving away this DVD, and I guess we'll have a link that people can get to that and get their copy of that DVD.
Absolutely. We'll have a link here next to the video too. So
Awesome.
yeah, thanks, Noah. That's a really good gift. Thank you for offering that.
Oh, my pleasure, for sure.
Great. So we're this is pretty much we try to keep it around 30 minutes for everyone because everyone's pretty busy. We don't want to have the viewers waiting too long. So we appreciate your time. Do you have anything else you want to mention before we end our recording?
Sure. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I really appreciate you, Kelly, and your heart for the horses and just setting them up and just the opportunity to hear from so many different experts in their fields and what they're doing and how they put the horses first and the sport second. That is just so encouraging because I really believe that by putting the horse first, like everything else follows after that. Like you're going to do well in your discipline, in your sport. You'll do better than you might realize by putting that focus and effort and concentration on the horse.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. And yeah, it's been great talking with all these different influencers too. It's very inspiring too. So I really appreciate your time. And yeah, we'll be talking soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks.
Bye bye.